So we'll start broadcasting this and start bringing in the attendees. You should start seeing them popping in here in a second. I'm getting some text popping in. So as you're coming in, I'm going to launch a poll. Hopefully this works correctly. Oh, look at that, poll in progress. We'll launch a poll and just have everybody kind of answer a question for us. How are you currently doing? So, brutally honest with yourself. This is an anonymous survey. If you could just click a button and kind of let us know, how you're doing right now. This will give us a little bit of information so we can tee this up. Jamie, can you see this poll going on? Or
I saw it pop up, but with my screen share up, it ends up hidden. But I did see it pop up.
Okay, so we're getting some answers on it. I got some greats. Higher percentage right now is 59% and hanging in there. Some on the lower end as well. So we'll let this run for just a couple minutes. I'm going to run through a quick introduction of Jamie, who is with us today. He even drew his picture on his opening slide, which I thought was kind of cool. So we can we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure. Not a lot of presentation today, no slides or anything, more conversational. And Jamie's got a really cool tool. He's just going to draw some pictures and show us how to do some great work. As we kind of open, Jamie's the founder of J Flinch, which is an advisory firm that focuses on helping business cultures, capabilities, leadership, and operating systems to enable companies to perform at scale. He's leveraged his experience to help and transform over 300 companies. Areas of expertise include continuous improvement, innovation and entrepreneurship, coaching and training, process transformation, business strategy, and organizational design. Today, we're going to be talking about strategic pivots in business and kind of how to manage the balance between process-driven and instinct-driven decision-making, which I thought was really, really interesting. Some of the last interactions that we had in person, Jamie, we had a room full of people, which seems like, forever ago we could have a room full of people.
Yep.
Everybody had a mousetrap game, and there were these like teams of 4 or 5. And the goal was, this is mousetrap. Everybody on the call knows what mousetrap is. You put the little ball in and it ends up on one side, and it's, how long does it take for that to happen? And you gave us some instruction and some tools and said, make it shorter, basically, right? So you had to shorten the amount of time that it took the ball to go across. And there was a few rules around it, not a lot. And you had a few tools you could work with, but you had to be very innovative in rebuilding the game so that the ball could get through the thing quicker. And obviously it was a little bit of a contest because you had other people you were competing with and
always
certain roles. So that's a little bit of kind of the situation that we're in today. One of the things that we've been doing, I'll hold this up, is we've been talking about DSRO or playing defense to get to stabilization, to get to reset, to get to play offense. So when we're thinking about our companies in those kind of 4 categories, this defensive category, we spent a lot of time in defense recently. Some of us have gotten to stabilization, or at least a little bit more stability than we did have a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Some of us are moving into reset. So this is, kind of today's conversation is how do we look at resetting? How do we make decisions about resetting, whether that be short-term or long-term? And then, how do we play offense again? Is it too early? Is it too soon? Is it too late? Are we going to capture a market? When? What's the timing kind of look like? So this is a really, really exciting session for me because I think pivoting is something we're all going to have to do. Some of us more than others. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. We've got 20%, 65% of the people say hanging in there. 26% of the people say great. So that's awesome.
That's good.
6% are frustrated and 3% are depressed.
Okay. So, well, the reason I propose these questions, and I'll share a little what my current practice is. I'm starting every meeting I have with basically a mental health check, because I talked to somebody today. His mother was in the hospital and actually in her diary wrote out a last will and testament. Didn't need it, thankfully, but that's where he was. That was what was on his mind today, and we just can't take any of it for granted about how people are feeling. Because even if somebody's got twin 3-year-old kids at home while they're trying to work from home, they're stressed out. And so I think we have to be a little more mindful of ourselves, There's nothing about the brave face. Just let's deal with it. Talk to somebody, reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member. And I've helped a lot of leaders over the years with different leadership models, but right now, most of the ones I'm coaching, I'm just using one word, and that's empathy. You just have to have some empathy for where people are, what they're struggling with through this process. So I appreciate those sharing. We have to be able to talk about this openly because people are struggling in a lot of ways. So it wasn't really our topic, but like I said, I start every meeting this way now. So.
Yeah, somebody asked me, could we share the results in the Q&A? And I did a little screenshot, sent it over to Leah and asked her to share it there. So we should be able to see it very soon. Great.
All right. So we're ready to jump in, I guess. Yeah, I'm going to talk about strategic pivots. It's something that I do in a lot of different domains. I help internal functional groups of large companies pivot. I help large and small companies with their strategy. I actually teach entrepreneurship at university level, and I spend a lot of time mentoring students, student entrepreneurs through their strategy, which besides helping students, it gives me like lots of reps. I get to exercise the muscle a lot of times. And so I'm gonna come at this. How I come at everything is I look at things multidimensionally. So to me, strategy is a plan and an executional plan, but it's also it's a process by which you got there. It's also a thinker, right? The person, it's personality driven. It's a human being. It's creativity. It's all of those things, and it's how we put all those things together. So I'm going to talk about some of the things I do regardless of the situation, because we should be thinking about pivots more frequently anyway. And we'll talk specifically about how we might think about those in this condition, in this situation. Along with your sort of reset and go on offense aspect of your frame. So.
And as we go along, if you have questions about anything, how it relates to your business or clarifying questions for Jamie, use the Q&A box, and it's very conversational. So I'll jump in and ask those questions on your behalf.
Yeah, and please do. It's not a canned pitch, so these are just my notes and thoughts that I want to share. So the questions will help a lot. You see that Petra Coach has these great caricatures of their team. This is a picture of me. It's actually pretty realistic. I went for Halloween last year. I was Charlie Brown. I didn't even need to dress up, so awesome. Makes it pretty easy. So I'm gonna share a model. Some of you have seen this before, some maybe not. It's called the Business Model Canvas. It's also called the Lean Canvas. There's a book called Business Model Canvas. And I could spend a lot of time on this, but I want to encourage why we think about laying out your business model on this template. The idea is that most leaders I work with, especially entrepreneurs, they either have sort of a value customer connection mindset and they're really focused on those aspects, or they have a real sort of product or service value perspective, and they have that kind of focus. And that's their personality coming out through the strategy. But what happens is if you're really, really good at what I call the front stage and the backstage, right? The market side or the back of the house side, you tend to have blind spots in other places. And especially when it comes to pivots, we tend to not focus on the full picture, and we miss really big opportunities. So I'm just going to really walk through quickly some key things to think about as you think about this, using this framework. That it's not going to give you the answer, but it's a way to have the conversation, especially with partners, with a thought partner, with an advisor, with your team. If you are so inclined to include them in the strategy, it gets it out of our head and into an open space where we can talk about. So customer segments, of course, that's pretty traditional aspect, but we have to think about customers versus consumers. And that includes, situations where you're selling to one company, but, one division is the user, they're the consumer. Another division is the payer, they're the customer, right? But many people are sort of market in, and so you might start with that box, but you do have to be clear about who you're really serving. Customer relationships, we have them shaped. Some are very transactional on one end of the spectrum. Some are very long term. That's going to shape, especially now, how some things work, right? So your business, very long term customer relationship, and so you're doubling down on that relationship right now with services like this. Others that are more transactional have to reset every transaction, which makes the need for pivots sometimes to happen faster, because if the transaction opportunity goes away.
Can I ask a question on customer segments really fast? So when you're drafting this up for someone or working with someone, how granular do you get in that particular area? Do you get all the way down to, business size, or is it just kind of this category of business?
I think it depends on how much you know, and I think the key is it's iterative, right? So if I'm working with an entrepreneur, a lot of times we're staying fairly high level, but then, and what I'll get to is we'll define some key aspects of each bucket, and that'll drive the plan. And then we won't go more granular in every single category. We'll go more granular where we need to.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then the other aspect here is, is it value-based relationship, or is it a more contractual based relationship? Where on that spectrum are you, right? So if you're in a commodity business, nothing wrong with that. Probably on a contractual relationship, and that provides a little stability now, right? But those terms are going to be challenged in a lot of different ways. Channels, a lot of you know an awful lot about that. Just to me, simply inbound, outbound is the highest level. How do you reach customers? If we have time, I'll share mine. I'm really my business is poorly shaped around channels. I've kind of had all the work I could handle through referrals, which means I don't shape my business, which is a missed opportunity in a lot of ways. Yeah. But it's just, every business has weaknesses. That's one of mine.
I've got a quick question if you want to allow somebody to ask it real fast.
Please.
I got Arnie on here, and I'm going to allow you to talk real quick, Arnie. So jump in with your question.
Whoa, man. I was on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you have a question?
I did not. I'm sorry. Did I hit a button? I'm so sorry.
You raised your hand. Bye, Arnie.
Oh, okay. So value proposition, it's to me, it's three questions. It's what problem are you solving for the customer? Being super clear about what problem for them are you solving. Right now, this is interesting because people's problems are different, right? So I'm actually in conversations with a ventilator company. Their demand is up 2,000%. And they don't know how to scale. They've never done that before. And so that's their problem right now. And it's not an old relationship. It's kind of a new conversation. In the end, I'll just be doing whatever I can for free for them. But that's their problem right now. Talked to another that's in the hygiene business this morning. They're at full capacity, but they're working hard. They're just trying to keep their employees safe and serve their customers. Those are their only two goals, right? So the problem can shift, and if we miss the problem shifting, we can be in real trouble, right? So again, you're helping people with the reset, and so that's the stabilize, the defense, and the stabilize. So that's a new problem, and we have to make sure we understand that problem. What form does that solution come in, right? Product, service, whatever that might be, and then perhaps most importantly, what makes it special, right? Why are you solving that problem better than someone else is? If you don't know what that is, then you probably don't have it, and that means you need to dig a little deeper from that regard. In these activities, I won't spend a lot of time on this. Just that, what are the key activities? And to me, the connection to the value proposition is what matters, right? Paying your taxes is key, right? You got a business if you don't, but it doesn't define your strategy. So what are the activities you need to do that are special, that are critical, that you would, it doesn't mean you're not going to outsource. It just means you better pay attention to the quality of that delivery. And what are your resources? Intellectual property, so this is IP, this is assets. People that have cash as an asset right now, interesting, how can they leverage cash as an asset in a time when a lot of people don't have or are worried about not having cash. Talent is a resource, right? So what are those resources? And then finally, the partners, right? These could be contractual relationships. They could be just relational. They could be a bunch of different kinds. The reason this is so important is to lay out your business model this way is that if you're a front of house guy, if you're like I'm all about the market and I focus on this, but the leverage point is around your IP and you can pivot and go after an entirely different market, you're probably going to miss it, right? Because you're so focused on your customers, your market, your segments that you're gonna figure out what do those customers not have that I need to go solve. But you have some IP that you can go pivot on, build a whole new business model to a whole new market, and you're going to miss it because you're not paying attention to the whole picture.
I think that's a key point, right? So that's something truly, I mean, it just hits me when you say it because we have a tendency to start on this, well, on my screen is the far right side, thinking about the customer, right? So this is what we've kind of always done. This is our customer. How do we serve them in a different manner versus what do we have to serve a new customer with? And asking that question, who is the new customer?
Right.
I do have one question, and I think the answer is going to be yes, you're going to need to do this. But the question is, we serve two distinct customer sets, but we're trying to serve an overarching lifestyle to meet the needs of both. Does one create a separate business model canvas for each customer base?
That's a great question. So here's what I do, as long as it doesn't get too messy, is I color code. Here's some green for one set of customers, the stuff that we're doing, and here's the different customer set of stuff that we're doing, and then we start to look at where are they the same, right? And so you overlay them on top of one another, because if they have nothing in common, right, then you figure out, well, we're really two separate businesses. And then what's key is that a strength. I'll give you an example. A business I'm an investor in had a very consumer-driven business. Sell directly to the consumer, very transactional, but high repeat customers. They took a key resource they have, and they started serving a completely different market. But when we overlaid both business models, the one for two different markets on top of each other, we saw what's common that we really need to nail for both segments, and then what's new or really different that we run the risk of doing both of them poorly, right? So our new business was very long, one customer, long-term, high volume delivery. So the type of way we would engage an account rep for that customer and a salesperson for the consumer, they're going to have to work differently. And if we try to split the difference between the two of them, we'll do both of those things poorly. Right? That's
a good point.
So I think the overlay is important. Where are they really common and where are they really distinct? And make sure you don't muddle the waters between them too much.
Awesome. And she says, very helpful. Thank you. So good job.
Awesome. So the key is, you find what's important around here, right? I'll give another thing just around key partners. Again, people think I'm gonna pivot around a resource, I'm gonna pivot around a channel, I'm gonna sell more into that channel. I had to pivot myself. It's a small one, but we're actually leveraged a key partner. It's another company. They have some IP. I'm running out of colors here. They have some IP. I have some talent. We have a relationship with a key partner that owns the channel, And so we're looking for how we put those two things together, leverage that partner to build a whole new product stream. Right? And so you, like the partners, you think, oh, it's just stuff I need to go deliver. You can pivot around any part of this if you're looking at it and asking yourself tough questions. So let me kind of zoom out here so you can still see this, but focus on different types of pivots. So there are different types of pivots, and I want to kind of lay out 4 different types of how we think about them. Now, the first, just to kind of get out of the way, is abandon and shift. This is when the core assumptions of your business cease to be true, right? Which depending on the duration of this could be true for some businesses. Kodak, and I'll come back to this as an example later, was sort of a long-term example of this. They actually knew in the 70s, they predicted that consumers would stop using film by 2010. Like they nailed it. Like it's just like they nailed it decades earlier. They knew the assumptions of their business were obsolete. Their strategy was make film cheaper. It's just stupid, right? That's where they are today. Right? So you have to be careful. As I work with student entrepreneurs, some of them start exploring a business idea, and that's their idea. So they just keep going after it without testing that their core assumptions are wrong. I personally have a habit of, I try to force myself every month to have a new business idea, to practice saying no, first of all, and practice sort of testing the core assumptions, because I'll have an idea, I'll explore it, not worth it, doesn't make sense, right? But practice not falling in love with each new idea, because we shouldn't. I don't have a lot of great examples for this because we never hear about them, right? They crumple something up, throw it away, and start over in some way. The next is how to leverage a pivot point. So this is something that is strong in what you do, right? It's a strength somewhere else on your market, right? So you have something over here that you're really strong, and you're going to go pivot around that, go in a different direction, and leverage that. So great example of this is Amazon's web services, right? They said, we sell stuff online. We need kick-ass, high reliability, high-speed servers that's a key resource for us to do our value proposition. Then they said, how do we turn that key resource into its completely own business model, right? So that's the pivot. Now you can abandon and pivot, right? You can go from one end to the other in that standpoint, or you can just build a whole new additional business around that. But the idea is you're finding the leverage point somewhere on your business model canvas and pivoting around that as like a fulcrum, right? So right now, again, using short-term examples, GM, Ford, these are examples, I would say, of the leverage of pivot point, right? They know how to run complex supply chains with lots of components, with lots of assembly and testing to make sure it goes out the door and works, right? They know how to do those things. Now we could argue others do it well, but they can do that better than I can do that in my garage. So that they're leveraging that pivot as a pivot point to support building ventilators, right? They shouldn't build masks, right? Because they can do things other people can't, right? So they're looking at that as a pivot point. I've been helping a lot of small business owners for free around helping them think through their strategy, just because, that's my short-term pivot point in a sense. Just GM and Ford are not going to be in the ventilator business for long, but it's a short-term pivot to get through today. But it leverages something they're already good at, right? It's leveraging what they're good at. The next is bigger. It still has a pivot point, but I'll call it a reshape. And what this means is this is not just a swing. This is when a whole bunch of assumptions around your business model are no longer valid or are being threatened or challenged, but you still have somewhere in there a core value proposition. So Netflix is a good example of this. Right? You know, most of what they used to do in mailing DVDs to people no longer was going to be valid. Same thing was true of Blockbuster, right? One hung on to their business model, another decided to reshape it. Comparing to Kodak, Fujifilm is another one. Right? Fujifilm, you know, film was going away. Fujifilm is a massive chemicals producer, especially into cosmetics and other things. They were really good at chemistry, in chemical management, stuff that went into film. Lots and lots of IP. They took the core of their business and pivoted it in a major way where lots of their business models ceased to be true, including their value proposition. But their assets and their capabilities didn't cease to be true. They found new ways to provide value around that. So that's when you figure out what's still left when you shred away, and then what can I do now? I have a friend, dear friend, who's a caterer. Right? Like week one, like 5 weddings canceled, boom, gone. Right? And this is a business where it doesn't stack up, right? She can't do 2 weddings in the same day in October. Right? It's just lost business. So what can she do? Cook and prepare food. That's what's core. Everything else about her business, other than having a kitchen, was gone. So now, short term, providing a daily menu. Usually, I think it's one thing. Taking orders for it a couple days in advance, and I can't remember if it's delivery or pickup, but providing sort of prepackaged meals, including an upcoming Easter meal. Right? It's taking what's core, stripping away all the stuff that is no longer true, and finding value in that business.
We have the exact same example. It's called Tennis Suite here in Nashville, and I've been on their website a couple of times to order. They're sold out. Like their business is completely different and like going nuts because everybody wants to just let me pick it up or bring it to my place, and I want it all done. I don't have to mess with it. I can't go sit and eat it anymore. So it's a completely different business model, and it's working very well.
Yeah. Yep.
And there'll be another pivot coming.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And then the last, just to give, complete the list, is basically expand. It's not a pivot as much. Expand around a strength. And so, a long-term example of this is Starbucks. They have a location people go to. They have a point of sale. And so they just kept selling, an ever-expanding menu. And it's not about options. It's about expanding their average sale price, right? So the business model was the same. It's just they found what they were good at, and they just kept expanding on that strength, right? I would argue this could maybe be considered leveraging a pivot point, but right now Target, right, they're doing, lots of people are doing this, but my wife did this the other day, ordered online, 4 hours later, drive up, tell them what car they should be looking for with some kind of text or online message, drive up, put the stuff in the car, off you go. Right? And so what's their strength? Well, their strength is managing large volumes of product. Their strength is their store operations, right? Not online. They're not nearly as good at that as, say, Amazon or even Walmart, but they're really good at store operations. And so, how do they shift then very quickly to expand around what their strength is around this? You could argue that's a pivot rather than expand around a strength, but the point is they know what they're good at, and they're busy as hell right now, right? So these are the different types of pivots. What I want to shift to then is, as you pivot, a lot of what's on your business model canvas starts to change. So let me just go back here and give us another look. And once you know where you're pivoting, you start to say, oh, well, this has to change, and there's some aspect of this that has to change, and this needs to, be multiplied, and this is going to shift in a certain direction. So a whole bunch of things start to change with it, and you use those are your gaps, right? Each one of these are problems that you have to solve to deliver on your pivot, right? You don't just pivot and be like, now we're this. No, you got to do 40 things to deliver and execute on that pivot.
So Jamie, just a clarifying question. So we would use this model and draw out like our pre-COVID-19 business on it first, and then think about ask ourselves those questions. Where are the assets, et cetera, right? So we're our potential pivot points, decide on a pivot, and then redraw.
Yes, exactly. So to lay that out, let me lay that out sequentially for right now. What I would do right now is draw February 20, right? I would cross out what's no longer true, right? Because that happened to most businesses, right? So if we have time, I'll show you my example of what's, well, here's a quick one for both you and I, right? I spend, I'll say 9 out of 10 weeks on the road on an airplane, right? That's just no longer true, right? And I have no idea how long it's going to be true before we put, 300 people in front of a speaker to deliver a speech again. Yeah. I think we'll go back to work. Doesn't mean we're going to start having large groups the same day. So who knows how long that lasts. So right now, cross out what's no longer true. Find your gold, right? Whatever it is, right? Find your gold, your strength, your passion, your whatever. Where's your gold on what's left? And then redraw what that business model is around that gold.
Good insight. Thank you.
Now, as you redraw it, right, there's a whole bunch of things that are no longer true. So, or that you have to change, right? So you have to have a model to break those up. And I'm going to change colors here again. The mistake people make when they're thinking about all the different gaps that they have to close. We have two different types. Put 4 different types, but we have known gaps, or gaps we know how to close, right? So if we're not doing this right now, but if you're moving from store 100 to 101, you probably know how to do that. That's a known gap, right? Oh, we're going to expand into this market. Great. Okay. Build a store, whatever. You know how to do that. Then there's the unknown. This is stuff we don't know how to do yet, right? So the mistake I see most people do is they tend to hear with the known, build a plan, and here they tend to hope. And it's like, well, I don't know a bunch of this stuff, so we'll hope it works out. No, you need a really good action plan around the unknown stuff. So don't avoid that stuff, embrace it, right? Launch into it, build a plan. And the other 2 criteria are discrete and continuous, and I'll make those clear here in a second. So a known gap that's discrete is, I'm going to open up a new store. I'm going to do one more webinar, right? I'm going to do something I already know how to do. I just need to define the goal, build out a plan, figure out all the steps, and just go execute, right? That's what that is. The continuous is stuff that I have to do every day. You don't just deliver, you have to continue to deliver on. So personal health, right? You're good at fitness. You can't just build a plan and say, I'm gonna get to 190 pounds and then I'm done. Like, no. You need a metric, right? You're gonna need probably a metric. You're gonna need to measure what's important to you, and you're gonna need to constantly adjust your plan of what you need to go do to deliver on that continuous thread, right? So those are the stuff people usually take care of. Down here in the unknown, that's where we fail. So here, it's what experiments can we run, right? What experiments can we run? So if you're a caterer, can you start with one weekend of a menu and delivery service and see if people respond, right? See if you can do it, see if you can respond, see what works, see what doesn't. You have an audience, again, this is not going to work. Well, I'll flip it the other way. You used to have a storefront. You think you want to build an online store. Well, can you throw stuff on Etsy temporarily just to test pricing and response rate from your existing customer base, right? So or if you're developing a new product, right? Is it feasible? What tests can you do to go figure out, is it feasible, right? So experiment and test, find out if that thing works, right? Or in what way it works. Continuous is more difficult, right? So continuous is, I'll just make this up as an example. The market I want to sell into is somewhere between 1 million and 1 billion. And I don't know. I don't know where it is. So if it's 1 million, I'm sad. If it's 1 billion, I'm pretty happy. I don't know enough, right? I need to learn more. You never get to find, precision, right? Because the market's always moving. So the best case, this is the best knowledge we might ever get. But we need a plan that does two things. One, how do we learn to narrow the spread of knowledge, right? Right now, I think a lot of companies we don't know if the general GDP is going to be down 8%, 13%, or something worse, right? A lot of forecasts I'm seeing between 8 and 13% down, but we don't know, right? But if I care about GDP, which most of us don't, we care about our particular market. What are the steps I can take to narrow the knowledge about what I need to understand? It could be, people are going to I do online training. Well, maybe people are willing to pay this, people are willing to pay that. I don't know what they're willing to pay. How do I narrow my knowledge about what the right pricing model is for a new market? Right? So I need a plan. Good.
Would some of that come through experimentation, testing, A/B, et cetera?
Absolutely, right?
Some of that might be outside resources, whether it be checking out what other people are doing, asking some questions, getting yourself in a mastermind group, getting people who are experts in that to give you some knowledge.
Yes, yeah, it can be. Let's go ask 10 customers. It can be some real data-driven stuff. It can be hiring experts. It can be buying information sources. It can be a lot of different things. But you need a deliberate plan to narrow the range of your important question.
That's good. I like that. Yeah.
And then the second part is you need to define how narrow you need it to be before you can act. Right? If you don't define how much specific, you're never going to get completely specific, right? You're never going to get complete knowledge. How much ambiguity do you need to remove before you're willing to act? And if you don't define that up front, you just keep kicking down the can down the road and keep saying, I'm not sure, I'm not sure, I'm not sure, I'm not sure, and never act on your knowledge gap. And you just can't operate that way. You can't just keep kicking the ambiguity down the road. You need to define how much ambiguity you need to remove before you can act.
And how much of that, and like this is like an opinion question, how much of that would be data driven versus kind of gut feel and intuition, or is it a mixture of both at the same time?
So I think, let me try it this way. I think this is a combination of things, but this arrow is a lot of data, right? But whether I need to be here at this level or here, I think that might be more intuition, right? How much ambiguity am I willing to deal with before I'm willing to commit based on plugging in my intuition? That probably defines on how far out you can operate. The data helps, again, close the model up, right? But the model plus my intuition defines whether I can act here or act here.
Yeah, and as you consume more and more data, you become smarter. Your gut feel increases. Your intuition gets better at the same time. So I can see where you start the data to feed the other. So that's good.
So then you use this to drive, then you have, an action plan that you can drive your strategy with, right? Because strategy on paper is useless. It's what are you going to go do? What are you going to go do? But you use this sort of framework to start figuring out what your actions are, both around the knowns and around the unknowns. Put your action plan together and then drive, right? But the key is, what I see is a lot of people is they have a really good action plan around their knowns, and around their unknowns they hope. And so this stuff I never see in their action plan. Here's our learning path as part of our strategy.
Well, I think that's classic entrepreneurial behavior. I mean, I'm looking at this, and it's like a broken mirror I'm looking into, because I do, this is exactly what I do most of the time, is just go take action.
Right.
And I think, the other kind of thought I have around this is, and I'd love to hear your side, right now, action is like, our time and space to figure it all out just got from this to this, right? So it's like, we got to go pretty damn fast. I guess you figure out where are you most comfortable, or where can you be least uncomfortable before you take action?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's part of it. It's where can you be least comfortable? I think coming back maybe to the short-term action plan, another filter around this is, where am I on the survive spectrum? Mm-hmm. Right? So if I'm not going to survive unless something changes, right, you're going to have to, right? Because the known, what you know is that you will fail if you don't change something. So you're going to have to tolerate on a pivot more ambiguity, because you're going to fail, right? Because you can't just ride it out. You have high confidence of failure if you don't do something. So that means you're going to, the worst thing to do is stay put. You're going to have to pivot. And so you're going to have to accept more ambiguity in that frame. If it's, you can survive, then I think the next question is, is it short-term pivot? Am I trying to pivot for 2020 or the next few months? Or is this an opportunity to do a long-term pivot, right? And that's where you can deal with more ambiguity. Because, on a long-term pivot, if you're going to survive, you can do a couple things over here in short-term. You can invest in your strengths and then be prepared for the long-term, whether it's a return to normal or it's something new, right? And I do think, we shouldn't, even if we are in this category of we're going to survive, we should at least use this as an opportunity not to return to normal, but to return to better, right? So even if it's not that our strategy changes, then use the time to invest in your strengths, whether those are relational strengths, whether those are intellectual property, whether that's team talent, right? Invest in your strengths so that even if your strategy doesn't change, you're still better coming out of this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think this return to better is a great statement, something that everybody should carry away, whether that's like dramatically different and better, or, somewhat less than dramatically different and better.
Right.
Don't miss the opportunity to get better during this time period.
Yep.
Very cool.
So this is kind of the last thing I had planned. I don't, when I do this with a more private audience and I'm kind of facilitating them through it, I can use any example I want as long as it's not competitive, because, it's just a private audience, but I can't use a lot of those in this broad of an audience. So I thought I'd throw out my own just as an example. And I just as an example of how I'm thinking through it around those kind of short-term, long-term, pivot versus invest, right? So I'm not going to go through the detail. You can read it, or at least pretty well, but like travel, gone. I'm going to make that red. Travel, gone. Speeches, I'll say gone for now, right? But the question is, when? Right? Are we going to go back to work but still not have meetings of more than 3 people, and still not travel, and then we can have bigger meetings but we still can't travel? And that, I don't know, right? So this is actually one of my gaps like that, my learning gaps, right? What am I paying attention to? I'll probably pay attention to Jack Daly and see when he hits the road again, right? But what can I pay attention to see if that market permanently different or slightly different or wildly different? I don't know, right? But right now, it's short term, it's definitely out. So I'm doing 2 things, right? I am investing in my relationships, right? So every client I have, I'm giving them, complete flexibility to use my time as they see fit, regardless of how much we sort of contracted to support them. And I'm investing particularly in developing a broader, set of videos. So I have a private platform. My clients subscribe to that. I didn't even have on my roadmap a 10 video strategic thinking course, but it's now in production, right? Because I'm going to invest in that particular thing. And then where I need to learn, it's not on here because I haven't really redrawn. Well, I guess it is on here. Here, online communicate. I was already doing that. I was already doing a lot of remote coaching because the cadence was faster than my flights. So now I'm taking that and I'm learning. I'm doing lots of experimentation and testing about how to do that better with my clients. So these are where can I invest? So I'm investing here. I'm pivoting here, right? And I'm preparing to pivot. I'm sorry, not around that, around speeches. I'm preparing to pivot around that, but I don't know what the pivot is yet. And so I have somewhat of I don't want to call it a detailed plan, but the beginnings of a plan to pay attention to what that market starts to look like.
Yeah, that's cool. And this is a reflection a lot of the way that our business operates too. So I'm in complete alignment with, I track all my flights. I know I had 186 of them last year, and this year, I'm not going to meet those numbers. So
no, I was personally glad Delta's investing in long-term relationships. So that's why they were the first airline to announce that as a diamond flyer, my status is renewed for 2021. Right?
Yeah.
And so now, not that I was really worried about that in the grand scheme of things, I don't have to worry about that, right? I know they took care of me as a customer, and I'll go back to them as soon as we all can, right?
Yeah. Wow, a lot. It's a nice thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely, right. It's I do a lot of figuring out how to fly most effectively, and I've done pretty heavy travel for 20 years, and I've only once not gotten to where I needed to go. I've not gotten home lots of times, but as far as serving my clients, I've only once not gotten to where I needed to go. So that's all I had prepared for today.
Awesome.
Just from a note standpoint, I don't know if there's more questions from you or the audience. And
if there are any more questions from the audience, please send them in. Just submit them through Q&A. There are lots of recap notes and things that I've written down to send out. I'll make sure that this goes out as well. Jamie, give us one last thought. If you could, there's a question about, will this table be shared? Yeah, so we can send you a copy of the Canvas. That's easy.
Yep.
I can grab that online and send that to you. That's simple. If you had to just tell the folks on the line, like, what's one thing that they need to go do immediately, what would the one thing be?
Well, let me give it 2 because I'm really bad at following directions.
Okay.
I think number 1 is you have to really answer this question are you prepared to survive or not? I think it frames everything. And if you're, I feel very fortunate that I'm prepared to survive, and it gives me way more flexibility in my choices and what I want to do, right? I could, if I wanted to, take a few months off, just invest in content and kind of, spring back later. I feel very lucky that I can do that. But you got to answer that question first, right? Can you survive, yes or no? Because I think it really frames how you approach this in terms of aggression and everything else. I think that the second thing you need to do is focus, right? So yeah, you're gonna figure out what your goal is, figure out what you can't do, but I would rather people simplify their business right now. Simplify, focus on the gold, focus on what works, double down, triple down, quadruple down on that, and really deliver the hell out of it. Because I think that's, people are going to be very selective. If you're known for 10 things a little bit coming out of this, you may not be remembered. If you're known for one really good thing coming out of this, then people are going to call you back. Or they're going to pick up the phone and call you when they're ready. So, simplify, focus is I think super critical right now.
That's awesome. A couple of quick wrap up things. We did record this. It will be on the website. There'll be all the content that was kind of said today, recapped in notes will be on the blog. It'll go out as an email to all the participants. All of this information is on the website, petracoach.com, and we've got a special section for COVID-19. Hopefully we'll be able to just turn that into just a special section very, very soon. We do have 2 workshops as early as tomorrow. One of them is around this particular topic. So if you need some additional help, just getting in a room with a coach and walking through playing defense, getting the stabilization, working through reset and playing offense using some of the tools, thoughts, and ideas that Jamie had today, as well as some of the content that we produced, let us know. And then the CARES Act piece is still alive as well. It's not what we talked about here, but we do have a workshop specifically for preparing businesses so that they can go get involved in the SBA and the PPP sections. And then finally, Jamie, I met a very special person about 3 months ago. I was in St. Louis doing a talk back when we could do that. And there was about 50 entrepreneurs in the room. In the very front row, there was this woman sitting in the very front row. She had a hoodie on. She was kind of quiet the entire day, and she had this little name tag that said her name was Robin, and underneath it said "Tiny Superheroes." And about halfway through the day, I said, "Damn it, Robin, what is Tiny Superheroes? Because that's just the oddest name for a business." And she said, "Well, I have a business that takes and sends these little superhero capes. We make these little superhero capes, and they have playing cards with kids, and they send these little tiny capes out to kids that are dealing with some sort of a disability or disease." And she said, "My mission is to change the way the world views disability, disease, and children." And I looked at her and said, "Look, there's a lot of cool businesses in here, and people are trying to do stuff, but you're doing really, really important work. So I'm going to do whatever I can to support you. We will figure out a way to put 2,500 capes on 2,500 kids." So we've been promoting that and working with that for a couple of months now, and I think we're up to 700 or 800, something like that. So I'm going to donate some capes and make sure that they have your name on them for you to spend some time with us today. So we're going to put some capes on little tiny superheroes in your name, and I really, really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you. Super cool. Appreciate you doing this for your clients, and to all those listening, thanks for taking the time. Know it's hard out there. Get whatever help you need, both personally and professionally, and there will be a better day.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. We'll see you around.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.